Greatly thankful that you're here today. I'm John Norton with C, and I know you guys have busy lives and carved out some time to be here, and that means a lot to me. This week, our illustrious speaker is on his annual trip where he goes to some foreign country or something. I think they went to Canada, Banff. What is it called? Banff, Colorado, not Colorado, Canada. We have Colorado, Banff, Canada, and they're out there with, gosh, I know 25 plus guys. That's so a few of the guys that are normally here are at that. One year, I think I want to go on that, but I haven't made that trip yet. But anyway, we're glad that you are here, and hope you're having a good week. I saw some first people signing on the list for the first time there, and grateful for that. I just hope that overall your week is going well as you kind of track down this end. We've been doing this series on marriage, and it's just been a great series. I hope you've been blessed by it, and I am really thankful today. An old buddy of mine that comes to the men's round table, Mr. Kevin Armstrong is filling in, and I'm grateful for him to fill in because occasionally I'll fill in. And I was telling Kevin, the way Phil has got this thing designed, it is a major production to speak here because you have to do the outlines and the handouts, and it's a lot of work is what I'm trying to say. And Kevin's got a full-time job. He is a pharmaceutical rep. I call you that for most. Close enough there. And he's a family man, got 2 kids in college at Mississippi State. Enough said. I was going to say something. Anyway, and a wonderful wife, and I believe they're kind of plugged in at Pine Lake Presbyterian Church. And Pine Lake Baptist Church. Okay. And let's see. But he and I have gotten to know each other from here. And then I wanted to mention to you, we've also gotten to know each other from a ministry that Roan has on Monday nights. And I wanted to say to you guys that this program that Phil has, I think he needs to do some branding on it. But, it's kind of confusing. There's BPO, that's his overarching ministry. And by the way, you may have gotten a letter. We're trying to raise some money for the Ebenezer place out there, and if you can give to that, that would be awesome. They've been a little shy on the bathhouse out there, but anyway, there's BPO, and then there's the men's round table, but they're just a whole cadre of affiliated offshoot ministries. There's a Friday morning. There's a Friday. Of course, this is Thursday morning. There's just something just about throughout the week. There's deer camp. And so that's how I think Kevin and I got to know each other. And I would just use it as a plug to tell you to maybe plug into some of these other offshoot ministries that are out there that would be a benefit to you. But Kevin is going to share with us today and just kind of get a little about his story. And I appreciate very much him doing this. As I said, he's got a full plate. And for him to do this is no simple feat. And I thank you for doing that. He's also in school. He's training. This is what complicates his life as well. Training to be a licensed counselor. And he's going to be able to help men and women. So he's got a lot going on. So Kevin, thank you, brother, for your friendship. And he's helped my youngest son before and some things, just a lot of different avenues that Kevin has been a ministry blessing to a lot of people. So I am going to open with, and then I will turn it over to Kevin. So let's pray together. Father, we just come to you on this Thursday morning, and we invite you here, Lord. We don't want to just meet in the flesh. We want to meet with the help of your Spirit coming and just brooding amongst us and doing a work in us, Lord. We don't want to just get through the day. We want to have your strengthening grace. And Lord, we're confident that the scriptures are true, that you work to the good for us, Lord, that you actually serve us and love us and do good unto us. And so, Lord, I pray that every man in here would know and rest in your goodness this day, Lord. Maybe there's an obstacle in somebody's life and they're really looking to you, Lord. And you love us when we put our trust in you. And so we trust you this day for those obstacles. And Father, I pray that you'd bless Phil and the group of men that have gone out to Canada. Lord, I just pray you'd give them safe travels and bless their relationships, bless their the work that they'll be doing, Lord, and just bless their time and their trip, Lord. This is one of those things that's just a real special thing to be able to do. And I thank you for my brother Kevin, Lord, and just ask that you would anoint him and just use him as a blessing in our lives as we ask this in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Thanks, brother. Good morning. First time wearing this kind of a contraption, so let's see what happens. Phil, thanks for the introduction. It's really an honor for me to be here this morning, as I have been coming here for about 3 years on Thursday mornings, so I've gotten to know a lot of you. And Phil asked me if I would pinch hit, which I know is, you know, when you find out the preacher's not going to be there on Sunday, then you decide it's a good weekend to go fishing or something like that. So that's why I didn't tell y'all, you know. So, but yeah, you know, today, as John alluded to, you know, the ministry Phil has is about our stories. He even did, I think, a whole series about telling our stories and a few back. And so that's really what he asked me to do, was just to talk a little bit about my story and where it's led and how it's gotten me to where I am today. Which, as John mentioned, you know, I felt like God has called me to make a career change at the age of 50. I've been in medical sales for 25 years. And so here I am contemplating going into the counseling world. So, you know, that's a whole nother set of prayers and prayer requests that I'm currently involved in. In public speaking, they tell you should start out with a joke, something to break the ice, maybe loosen the crowd a little bit. So I came up with some ugly jokes, since because my story's got some ugly parts to it, as a lot of ours do. And I thought it'd be good if I used some audience members for this. So Walter, yeah, sorry. You are so ugly. You went to a haunted house and came out with an application. Brad, you're not getting off the list. Brad, you're so ugly. Farmers use your picture as a scarecrow. All right. Ha. Raymond, where's Raymond? I saw him. There he is, very back row. Raymond, you are so ugly. You stuck your face out of the car window and got arrested for indecent exposure. So there you go. I didn't say they were funny, but they are talking a little bit about ugliness. And so, you know, with indecent exposure and getting up and talking about giving your story, my real story is about redemption, because there are some ugly parts, and I've walked through a battle, but God has redeemed my life and redeemed my marriage, my relationship with my kids, and it's a great blessing. So if you've been a regular on Thursday mornings, you know, Phil's got the whole layout like John was talking about, and I don't even know where John went, but anyway, everybody's in the back. Okay, so I'm gonna try to stick to that. So I thought we'd start off with a song. He has the model of going with the song to kind of kick things off. And if you're a regular, you know he usually picks like a really antiquated song with a horrible quality video. So that's what we went with. So let's go with that.
Well, I spent a lifetime looking for you. Single bars and good time lovers were never true. Playing a fool's game, hoping to win, and telling those sweet lies and losing again. I was looking for love in all the wrong places, looking for love in too many faces, searching their eyes, looking for traces of what I'm dreaming of, hoping to find a friend and a lover. I'll bless the day I discover another heart looking for love. And I was alone then, no love in sight. I did everything I could to get me through the night. I don't know where it started or where it might end. I turned to a stranger just like a friend, 'cause I was looking for love in all the wrong places, looking for love in too many faces, searching their eyes, looking for traces of what I'm dreaming of, hoping to find a friend and a lover. I'm blessed the day I discover another heart looking for love. And you came knocking at my heart's door. You're everything I've been looking for. There's no more looking for love in all the wrong places, looking for love in too many faces, searching their eyes, looking for traces of what I'm dreaming of. Now that I found a friend and a lover, God bless the day I discovered you. Oh, you, looking for love in all the wrong places, in too many faces, searching their eyes, looking for traces of what I'm dreaming of. Now that I found a friend and a lover, God bless the day I discovered you. Oh, you, looking for love in all the wrong places, in too many faces, searching their eyes, looking for traces of what I'm dreaming of.
All right. So that probably sets the tone a little bit and gives you a little bit of an idea of my story. And I don't think it's any coincidence. 1 week from today is going to be the 3-year anniversary of kind of the most impactful day of my life, which at the time seemed to be probably the worst day of my life. And I'm sure you'll recall in the news leading up to that day 3 years ago, it was national news. Every single day there was reports about a group of hackers that had gotten a hold of a list from a website. And they've threatened to release the list if the owners of the website didn't shut the company down. And so I saw that, but I was sly. I had used fake names and alternate email addresses and all kind of good stuff. But what I didn't think about was I had used a credit card to spend some money on that website. And so when the list was released, I was one of the names on the list. And there were about 3,600 of us in Mississippi. And I've gotten to know some of those guys over the last several years. And, you know, the long and short of it is my sort of secret double life was exposed. And so getting ready for church on Sunday, August the 23rd of 15, CBS Morning News started talking about the fact that the list had indeed been released. And so I thought, well, I better check and see if I'm on that thing, because I knew I'd been involved with that website in the past. And sure enough, I found my name as we're walking out the door to get ready for church or to head to church. And so I, at the end, coming out of church, hard for me to concentrate that day, as you can imagine. I had to tell my wife and my 18 and 15-year-old child in the parking lot of our church that I was on the list. And my reasoning at the time was that if she found out from somebody else, I would not be standing here today, because she would have probably taken me out. And I say that half-heartedly, but so, you know, I just fully confessed, and that started a process of some emergency counseling, and going through a process of disclosure, and just looking back at sort of my history and what had got me to that point. And so, you know, as I've learned, sort of as John talked about in the school process, that a lot of us have traumas, and we have things from our past that sort of fuel an addiction in our later years. And so that's a lot of the story that I've kind of come to learn about myself that I didn't even realize. I was abused as a child. My dad was an abusive alcoholic. I was exposed to pornography at the age of 7. Was, you know, just heavily, I guess, subjected to all kind of inappropriate pornographic material in my house. It was, you know, in those days, dads in the 70s, you know, it was common to have a Playboy subscription, and some guys, I'm sure, even left it sitting out on the coffee table or whatever. And so I kind of remember those days. But the stuff that my dad was storing under his bed or in the closet was pretty rough. And so, you know, I don't want to paint that picture necessarily, but just to say that kind of helped fuel what I ended up getting into in later years, as I tried to cover up traumas and pains and hurts. Had I learned about community in those days, and you know, what it was like to have brothers that you could share your story with, you know, I wouldn't be speaking here today. So, like I said, I think God uses all those things. God didn't will for me to choose the path that I chose. He certainly would have willed that I went another direction. But thank God, He uses my story for redemption for me, and now for other men that have walked similar paths. And so, you know, I think when I start thinking about what does that look like, we have a choice. When we get to where I got on August 23rd of 2015, the choice I had was to fight or not to fight, just to give up. And so I chose to fight for my wife, for my family, and for God to do a work in my life that would change my life, and that would, I've been a Christian, you know, I've been a believer for all these years. I struggle with how can I be a believer, but still struggle with these things that I can't get rid of, you know. And so I think that's another common story in a lot of our lives, that we have these things that are in our secret lives that allow, that we kind of go to when times get rough. You know, it can be alcohol, it can be sex, it can be drugs, it can be work, it can be hobbies, you know, the things that we choose, and you can call it addiction or you can call it idolatry. I think that's a very appropriate word that God uses in the Bible, that the things that we choose to fill to soothe our pain, as opposed to going to God with it. So I just realized that I'm pretty heavy in some deep stuff. And so I was looking for a nice movie clip, because Phil always uses a movie clip. And I was thinking, you know, the choice to fight or not. Well, I need to come up with a really good fight scene for my movie. And I have a diminished sense of humor, as you'll soon see. And so I'm kind of thankful, because, you know, when the room gets heavy, I like to deflect with humor. So let's show that fight scene, and then we'll pick it back up. All right. Now I'm guaranteed not to be asked to speak again. Yeah. And I actually chose that video just thinking of the humor. But then I was like, you know, the fight that we're involved in is for the heart. So how ironic is that? That he, you know, he rips the guy's heart out the end and standing there holding it. So there's some imagery there that I didn't even intend. So, you know, that, and you can pull up the first sheet if you want to. So having the choice to fight or not, the first thing I thought about is we need an external power source. And when I say external, something other than ourselves, we need power that we can't find. We need the Holy Spirit. We need brothers in community, our families, lots of different things that help us to fill the thing that we're powerless over. Step one in the 12 steps of recovery that through the AA and other organizations talks about that we admitted we were powerless over fill in the blank and that our lives had become unmanageable. So excuse me, that's where I was. I had become powerless over a situation that I hid in shame and did not want to be exposed. And so, you know, I talked also about having a choice to make, the hard way or the easy way. And this is, I had an opportunity on the morning of August 23rd. A person called me and said they had just recently gone through a divorce and that they would be willing to tell people, my family, that they had used my credit card to pay for their membership to cover up and that they would take the heat. And I, you know, at the time, I actually only thought about it about 2 seconds, and I said, no, I'm sick, and I've got, and I was physically sick. Leading up to that time, for probably every 2 or 3 months, it seems like I was having bouts of gout, diverticulitis. So my sickness was starting to expose itself physically. And as I look back now, I just wanted to be clean. I wanted to be healed, and I just said no thanks. And I am not kidding when I tell you that since August 23rd, I have not had a single bout of gout or diverticulitis. And if you've ever had either one of those things, they are extremely painful. Put me in the ER several times, so it's not like waking up with a cold. You know, there was another very sad story from that day. There was a New Orleans seminary professor that was on the list, and he chose to take his life. And, you know, he chose the easy way out for him, but that's certainly was not the easy way out for the people that have to deal with the aftermath of that. There was a lot of aftermath in my choice as well that I'm still working through, to be honest. My wife and I are in therapy and have worked through lots and lots and lots of counseling. But I kind of had to go and work through my own, figuring out my past and kind of how did that come into my marriage and you know, those kind of things as well. You know, and I had to, Phil brags about his bracelet that he got, and then he was certifiable or something like that. He uses that joke. And if y'all are here for your first time, I apologize. Y'all please come back next week because this kind of laying it on. But so anyway, so I had to go away and get my own bracelet, and I went to Georgia for 47 days. So Phil, so I've got him on that one. You know, I came back from Georgia, and I showed up on Monday night with a group that Roan has. Showed up that first Thursday morning here. Went to deer camp, just got involved because you know, in talking to Roan and Phil, that was the remedy to start building that community that we hear so much about. And I've been involved ever since. I still am meetings, you know, meet with guys 2-3 times a week. I have accountability partners. I have guys that I can, even some guys I have maybe not talked to for 6 months, but I can pick up the phone and give them a call and tell them, you know, hey man, I'm struggling a little bit, and just talk it out, you know, and it's just amazing the way that thing that works. You know, when I think about just being confronted with those temptations, and I put rise above the law, you know, Romans 3:20 talks about that the law shows us how sinful we are. But then in Romans 7:14 through 25 is where Paul gives a really long, just lays his soul out there and says, man, why do I do the things I don't want to do? And I don't do the things I know I should do. I want to do what's right, but I can't. I want to do what's good, but I don't. I don't want to do what's wrong, but I do it anyway. Well, that certainly speaks to me and where I felt like I was at the time. So I felt like God was calling me to rise above my story. And, you know, just the fact that I'm standing here talking to you about it today is a good example of the work that he did, and that I was able to rise above. Doesn't mean the battle's over. The battle's not going to be over until the very end. So, you know, the next thing I talked about was that we have to gird up. Everybody, I'm sure, is familiar with, we have to arm ourselves for battle, and the armor, the spiritual armor that they talk about in the Bible. And I lost my place on my sheet. Sorry. 1 Peter 1:13. We have to prepare our minds for action and exercise self-control. It says, so roll up your sleeves, put your mind in gear, be totally ready to receive the gift that's coming when Jesus arrives. We can't be totally ready unless we are doing the battle every day. So, you know, my life now looks a whole lot different in terms of how I start my day. I get up and I do a little devotion every morning and spend some time in prayer. I try to, you know, read applicable material to whatever's kind of going on in my life at the time. Bill did a series, the 12-step series, one before this one, maybe, I can't remember. And he used a book by a guy named Keith Miller that was just taking the 12 steps and applying it to our spiritual lives. And that book's been great. I just get up and we'll read a little tidbit. And then if there's a spiritual reference or scriptural reference in the book, go over and read that scripture for the day. I'm real ADD, so I can't just, you know, I like to jump around and try to pick and choose different things. So that's been great. And the bottom line is I'm trying to arm myself for the battle as it presents itself every day. So the next thing I want to talk about was, after we've made that choice to fight or not, is what's the status of your heart? You're not going to be prepared to fight if your heart is not strong and ready. So I think a little bit about what 1 Samuel 16:7 says. But God told Samuel, looks aren't everything. Don't be impressed with his looks and stature. I've already eliminated him. God judges persons differently than humans do. Men and women look at the face, and God looks into the heart. So our inward appearance is what God's looking at, and that's what's important to him. And how we present on the outside, you know, for me, my outside presentation was I was on the praise and worship team at church, and you know, successful sales career, a long marriage, kids that were walking the straight and narrow somewhat, as much as a teenager can. You know, I'm very proud of the way that the kids they've grown into. So my outward appearance looked pretty darn good, but my inward appearance was completely destroyed. And so then the next thing when you talk about honoring or what's the status of your heart and getting strong is to honor the body. And this is, you know, speaks really specific to my sin. So that is 1 Corinthians 11:29 and 30. If you give no thought, or worse, don't care about the broken body of the master when you eat and drink, you're running the risk of serious consequences. That's why so many of you even now are listless and sick, and others have gone to an early grave. And as I already mentioned, you know, I was physically sick. I was certainly listless and sick, and possibly headed to an early grave, you know, had I not turned the path or turned the corner. And you know, there's other verses in the Bible. God flat out said, all right, I'll just give you over to this thing, whatever your thing is. And then there's other instances where he says, you know, all right, you've done your thing long enough. I'm just going to take you out. And that's a pretty scary proposition. So I chose to take this path, thank God. And the last part of this is I had to break the chain. I talked a little bit about my chain of addiction. My father was an abusive alcoholic. His father was an abusive alcoholic. His father was, we don't know a whole lot about. What we do know is that he had a couple of kids and then disappeared when my grandfather was like 8 years old. So generational sin is prevalent a lot of times. And the Bible talks about that the sins of a father will be reflected to the third or fourth generation. And so I think about that often, a frequent basis, that, I am that third or fourth generation from a man who abandoned his family when his kids were less than 10 years old. So, I chose to break that chain. I was willing to let God use my sickness for a better work. Is the better work to speak to those in a similar sickness by going to school and becoming a counselor and working with people who are struggling with addiction. And I feel like that God made it really clear that that was a path that he had laid out. And I gave him a lot of opportunities to stop and to tell me, no, this was not the right path, because it's a lot of work, to full-time job, full-time school, full-time family. So, but as I near the end of this process, I'm just grateful that I stuck with it and that he's been there to walk with me. Break the chain. I was willing to join hands with my wife and for us to grow closer to Jesus together, for the sake of my children and grandchildren. My pastor uses a symbol of a triangle and I didn't draw anything, but just a triangle. And so God is at the top of that triangle, and here's husband and wife. And as we grow closer to God and move up that triangle, we grow closer to each other. And so I think about that symbol a lot, and it's a pretty simple symbol, but it's very impactful to think about. It's going to be real hard to grow close to your wife if you're not growing closer to God in the process. So, how do we break the chain? And I've talked a little bit about it already. It's just, if you think about a workout analogy, and so you show up this morning and you say, I want to bench press 300 pounds. So you leave here, you've never lifted weights, let's say, and you head straight to the gym, put 300 pounds on the barbell. Most likely not going to happen. No matter how hard you try, you can push on that thing and try it. You can give all the effort that you've got, and that 300-pound bar is not moving. So when I think about that analogy, you got to start in the gym, maybe lifting 50 pounds, 75, 100, and building up to that. And that's the same way I think your spiritual walk is. I started with some real simple stuff, some real simple prayers, and some real desperate prayers, and just, God, get me through this. And you see some growth, and you look back and you can see where God has answered some prayers and God has moved some things, and continue that process. And so you can get to the point where you can lift 300 pounds, but it doesn't happen overnight or even over a year. In my particular case, the addiction of sexual brokenness, there's a series called the Conquer series, and if some of you are familiar with this, phenomenal series, and I would recommend it to anybody, regardless of, it's just a great thing for Christian men learning to walk in purity. It says that it takes 2 to 5 years on average to recover from the state of spiritual sexual brokenness that I was in. So I'm 3 years in. So I think, well, I'm making a little headway, but as I said earlier, it's just, you don't ever really end the battle. So, and then the last thing I had, and how are we doing? We're okay. So what's our responsibility? And I changed it. We need a lifeline. And so, Jesus is going to do his part. So we've got to do our part. And again, my weird sense of humor, I just was thinking of the using a lifeline with that Who Wants to Be a Millionaire show with Regis. And it's that external power source again, reaching out to others, and they need to pull us up. God needs to pull me up. There was a story about the pool of Bethesda and the man who laid by the pool for 28, 38 years, long time. Can't remember exactly. And when Jesus came up to him and he said, "Do you want to be healed?" And he was like, "Well, of course I do. I've been laying here. I can't do anything, And so Jesus told him to stand up, pick up your mat, and walk. And when I hear those verses, and a lot of the instances in the Bible where Jesus had a healing, a miraculous healing of others, he requires action on our part. He doesn't just snap his fingers and say, "Okay, you're good to go." This guy had to stand up and go to work. He had to go from a man who laid by a pool and did nothing his whole life to a man who had to go be responsible and get a job. And you know, if he had a family, support his family. So I feel like that's one of the things that God called me to do, was to stand up and take some action. You know, what kind of action would he be calling us to do? Exercising our faith. Our faith is ours. It's a personal thing. You know, the best way to decide what you believe about God and what God wants for you is by getting in the scriptures every day, getting in community, and doing the things that we hear over and over that really work. And then secondly, the action that we need to take is, if you think about the analogy of rolling down the highway and the double solid line in the middle, don't cross that double solid line. The book I'm reading right now is called Home Run, by Kevin Myers, who's a pastor in northern Atlanta, and learning God's game plan for life and leadership. And he takes a real simple analogy of baseball and applies it to our spiritual walk. So I would highly recommend that book. I'm doing it with a couple of guys right now in a little Bible study. But he talks about not crossing that double solid line. God gives us double solid lines. These are the things you are not supposed to cross. And so if we can pay attention to God's lines and fight to keep from crossing them, it'll help us build our career and our marriage and our family and our spiritual life. And then last, the thing I think we need to get is we need to get wisdom. So we can get wisdom from our Bible reading. God will speak to you through the Bible. He spoke to me. He speaks to me through music, sermons, reading the scriptures. But we need wisdom from others that have walked the battle and a little bit further ahead of us. You know, Phil was one of those people for me. And not sure why he asked me to speak today, but maybe that was it, because he and I share some similar pasts and some similar stories. He's a good bit, ahead of me in the journey. But when you see somebody else that has been able to conquer the ugliness of their life and use it for good, it's inspiring. And being able to turn around and share that with somebody else, the next guy that's struggling. As I think about who's going to be struggling, I have a 22-year-old son. And so, man, I pray that he doesn't ever walk through the mess that I've walked through, and that he can look back and when he's my age and say, I fought the good fight and I didn't go down that road. And if you have a son or a nephew or a brother, and they're walking through that battle, that wisdom that they can get from you or from others is just so critical. And then I used a verse there, Ecclesiastes 9:17 and 18. The quiet words of the wise are more effective than the ranting of a king of fools. Wisdom is better than warheads, but one hothead can ruin the good earth. And I love the NLT and some of the ways they can change the reading and just give it a real I think modern application. So sorry about that breathing, but the hothead thing, is, oh man, I was a rageaholic too. I won't even go into all that, but a lot of my sickness manifested in rage. I'm a tennis player, and I would rage on the court, man. If I wasn't winning, it was time to break a racket. It was just crazy stuff. And so, but I was just consumed with rage. Rome calls it eroticized rage when he talks about sexual brokenness. And I certainly recognize that. Let me see here. So that's it as far as the sheet goes. But, so what do I want people to know to help if you're in a journey of addiction, or if you know somebody that's in a journey of addiction? First of all, you're in the right place. Getting around godly men, getting in community, getting involved with Deer Camp, Monday nights, Thursday mornings, Friday mornings. There's groups that meet all over town. And even if this is, not your personal affliction, and, you will know somebody that has this battle going on in their lives. The Conquer series that I was talking about earlier, they've done studies, and they estimate that 60 to 80% of Christian men sitting in church on Sundays are in bondage to pornography. So, if I asked 60% of this room to stand up and we looked at what that looks like, that's a whole lot of guys, basically this whole side of the room. And it's not going away. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. These companies design ads and everything they do is to make it easier and easier for you to access this material that's going to take you down this path. And then I think about kids when I think about that. So for those of you that either are young, I think we usually have some high school guys. Sorry, not to pick on y'all. Y'all may be college now, but some of these young guys that come, man, I just think about what you're inundated with on a daily basis. And it's not just you, it's everybody, because computers are a part of our lives. So putting things in place like Accountable to You, Covenant Eyes, Net Nanny. There's all these different companies that these some Christian companies that come out with ways to protect yourself and protect your family from being able to get into this stuff. What else? Satan wants to keep us in a shame cycle. He wants to keep us in this place where our activity, the things that we're involved in, keep us feeling shameful so that we don't reach out to others. I had a thought that, well, I must not be a Christian if I have this addiction. And that's exactly where Satan wanted me, because that's where you can give up and you can choose the easy way out. Again, everybody in this room has a sin life. That's guaranteed. I don't have to, take a poll to find out if you have an active sin life. But God wants to offer you a message of hope and redemption, and forgiveness. And as I've said many times, just following the activities that good old Phil has taught us over and over. And community, man, I'm telling you, it's made a world of difference in my life. Because there's been times where, or I don't know what the word is, I lost it, but my wife has chosen not to really be too close to me. And she deserves or earned that right to say, I've had enough of you for a while. And so you don't have your wife to reach out sometimes when things are rough, and you got to have those brothers that you can pick up the phone or go get a cup of coffee with. So I had one last point. God wants a relationship with us because he knows how broken we are, and he knows that he holds the answer to redemption. One of the most significant forms of blasphemy that never gets discussed is when we proclaim great connection to God, yet we're disconnected from our family, our spouse, our brothers. So guys, I really appreciate y'all letting me speak today. It's an honor. It truly is an honor. I'm not Phil. I said I got everything Phil has except for charisma, good looks, charm, wisdom. But when he asked me to speak, it's an honor to know that the hard work that I've done allows me to stand up here and tell you a little bit about it. And my prayer and I would ask you to pray this for me and for other brothers that are fighting the same fight, is just, that you don't ever think you got it, that you got it licked, that now you can just put on the cruise control and coast, because I think that's right when Satan comes back with a pretty strong attack. So thank you. You want to...